Oh, my headphone wasn't even plugged in.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey there, it's Danielle and Alysia again, and I brought Alysia back here because Alysia is passionate and loves to talk about processes within companies. So welcome back, Alysia.
Thank you for having me again.
Today we are talking about accountability charts. Why accountability charts should be the most exciting thing to implement in your business and is not boring. How knowing who does what alleviates stress and pressure and increases productivity, and why you should have it in written form for the whole company to see and not just in your head, and how to have a team meeting and communicate your accountability chart and keep up to date, which seems like a lot, but what are your general thoughts and feelings about accountability charts in organizations?
Sure. So just to clarify, because I know when I first heard of accountability chart, I was like, wait, what is this? It's kind of a scary sounding word. And so really what an accountability chart is, for those of you that are not familiar, it is basically like an org chart for your business, but specifying and getting into a little bit more detail about what each person's roles and responsibilities are. And the point of the accountability chart is to allow you to delegate and try and increase internal productivity and ownership over certain tasks. So it took us a really long time to develop one, and it was really hard initially because from our experience, our team loves to help each other. If something comes to them, they're just going to start doing it or working on it, and it doesn't mean that they necessarily know or should be responsible for it, but they always want to do a good job and help each other out, which I can never be mad at. It's awesome. It adds to our culture. If you happen to receive a message that maybe is not necessarily intended for you, but it's directed at you, maybe it's from an outside party, a client, whatever, you really want to stop and think about, is this something that I am responsible for, or would somebody be better at responding to this? It doesn't have to be your ownership just because somebody put you in the to line. So I think since we implemented the accountability chart, it has been tremendous in helping everybody feel like it's okay to delegate. That's the point. It's not even real delegation. It's just directing the message to the right party. But you really need team buy-in on it and each other reinforcing how to use it. So when we first started with our accountability chart, everybody had a printed copy, even Brad, our CEO. I wanted to make sure he wasn't doing everything, and we needed to reinforce, like, hey, let's get you working on bigger, better things. So he had it right there on his desk, and every time he would get an email or a message, he would look at, like, okay, what is this message about and who should I be giving this to? So it takes a lot of practice, and it is really hard to just get into this new habit, but it can do amazing things internally for just speeding up productivity and responsiveness, decreasing stress, because maybe you're the type of person that wants to solve all of the problems, but you don't necessarily know how. Let's send it to the people that are supposed to be responsible for it and know that it's going to get handled.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So if you don't have an accountability chart, what are some examples of problems in our organization or organizations you've worked with that you see when they don't have that in place?
Sure. So even internally, what I've seen is, and I have experienced this with a couple of clients as well that we've worked on projects with, is you get a lot of people involved in the same project. It's not even, can't even be a project. Sometimes it's one single email message where somebody's asking you to do something, but because 5 people were included in the email and the 2 in the CC line, everybody thinks, okay, well, I should be doing something with this. But from my position, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, now 5 people are going to spend 5 to 10 minutes each doing the same activity when it could be handled ultimately and responsible for under one person. So you get a lot of fingers in the pie, if you will, and it can be overwhelming to get everybody to try and respond, but then it also can create external messaging that might not be similar, the same messaging. You want to make sure everything is cohesive. I see it as something that really can impact and potentially throw off people's days, but it can be so helpful once, and it's freeing. Like you feel relieved once you kind of start to know who to direct things to, who is officially responsible for it. By having it written down too, it eliminates the clutter and the uncertainty over who is responsible for what.
And it helps the customer too, right?
Yeah, we want to make sure that you get your answers as quickly as possible, but if it's not going to the right person initially, it can get stalled. Maybe one of the people, like I am notorious because I get so many things that I'm working on. It can take me a couple of days to get back to emails, but there are other staff that specifically have the KPIs to make sure that they get back to people and are responsive within a certain timeline that is different than mine, and it's not bogged down. So that can really help reinforce and get you the responsiveness that's needed.
Yeah. And I feel like I've worked with vendors before too that just like appear disorganized, and sometimes you're like, man, I thought this was a professional company, but they don't even know, what's going on within their own staff. And
yeah, and that's the part that's hard. And I mean, you can get away from it really easily because you go back into your natural habits, but it takes a lot of effort to do it internally and to reinforce. You maybe don't want to seem like the nitpicky person that's like, well, Alysia, this is actually your job. Here you go. And that's what I want to make sure, that no matter who you are, what you're doing, that you have the company culture to also support and almost provide that kind of, I don't want to call it pushback because it's not really pushback, but hey, Danielle, could you do this because it falls into your area? You use the accountability chart as your guidance, and it's important to just use that as your framework so you don't feel like you're trying to tell somebody what to do. Well, this is your role and responsibility. Here you go.
So how do you communicate that to your team?
Yeah, it's hard. I really think that the most important way that you do get buy-in is you show the value and the reason for why it's in place, and helping everybody understand, and even giving them examples of, hey, when you get an email that is not directed at you, what do you typically do with it? How does it make you feel? Do you all of a sudden drop everything that you should be working on to then tend to this request? Or wouldn't it be easier to send it to the person that is responsible? And I mean, sometimes everybody wants to learn and wants to pitch in, and that's totally fine too. So that is why we have cross training in certain situations. So if somebody cannot attend to it, they can always ask for help. But it really starts in my mind at the top of over communicating. Hey guys, it's okay to say, what do you want me to do with this? Where does this go? Clarify and just ask, hey, I just received this, does this go to you? And just always asking questions. It helps you feel empowered to know like, hey, it's okay to let it go. And I'm going to go over here and work on the stuff that I'm really great at.
Yeah. And not being a part of the CC queen messages of like chains and chains of CCs. And you're like, what do I even do with this?
Hey, Danielle, this is why I've included you. This is what I need you to do. If you don't have a clear direction, get off of the email. And who can do it the best in order to serve the client, but also to get stuff done internally. You want to make sure that everybody has lots on their to-do list. Let's not waste time trying to do somebody else's job.
Should we talk about like, what does this have to do with credit and collections? Like,
I think that this can really be tossed into any part of any business. Credit and collections specifically, you can have it in your own internal department. Use it from an internal standpoint of, okay, what does the credit and collections team need to have? Who is responsible for which? Don't try and muddle each other's jobs and cross over on everything unless it's necessary for training. But everybody should have their own unique set of roles and responsibilities. And when inquiries come in, really reinforce that.
Totally makes sense.
Yeah.
I know that you had one kind of like drawn out, if you will, like digital form. Is that kind of what you'd recommend for most people, is just to have something visual? And we have access to that too, so we know.
Yeah, I think in my mind, the best thing to do, no matter where you're physically located, like some of us are still working at home right now, some of us are in office, it's to provide multiple formats and locations for the accountability chart. So it's always there to reinforce. Print it out and you have it in front of you and you can use it as your reference document. We have it on our shared drive so everybody can access it if they need to look at it again. just have it everywhere. It's not going to hurt. It's going to help ultimately reinforce. And then when you become second nature, you're good. And we always update our accountability chart as your company evolves or makes changes. Maybe you add people, maybe you lose people. You shift the responsibilities so people know, okay, how do these inquiries or these types of requests or things still get handled?
Yeah, that's so true. Anything else that we haven't covered or that you want to talk about?
I just wanted to say, just in general, if you don't already have an accountability chart, maybe it's something to look at. And I know it can be a little daunting. We can even include maybe a copy of something. It is something that we got the idea from the book Traction, and we absolutely love it. So we can include that. And maybe if you haven't already, or we want to know from you, like, do you use an accountability chart or something similar? Yes or no? And I would love to hear what other people are doing to help solve the same problem. Something to also think about, though, is even with an accountability chart, you might be totally overloaded and overwhelmed because you only have so many hours in a day and you only have so much bandwidth to try and get things done and your own energy. And I think it's really important that you reinforce and you make it something that everybody within the department or within your accountability chart or your circle, or ideally corporately, feel that it's okay to voice like, hey, I'm tapped out. I am like complete. My bucket is totally full. What can I do? And make it collaborative. I never see a problem in anybody saying, hey, you know what, this is too much. I don't know what to do. And that to me is an opportunity for us to either look at what can we do for dumping potential activities that are maybe not the most important. Let's do an assessment of what kind of activities you're currently working on. And then I also use it as an opportunity, if you're in the position to look at hiring. Maybe it's something that is all of the activities are really important, but the capacity is just not meant for one person. So then it's an opportunity to look at maybe growing your team.
Anything else before we wrap up?
No, that's all I have to talk about today.
Okay, awesome. Cool. Thanks for sharing, Alysia.